Welcome, welcome. I am Amber Sotelo of Great Lakes Garrison, representing the 501st, and I am here with the lovely Rose Duignan, who is production supervisor and also marketing director for Industrial Light and Magic. So welcome, Rose. We're so glad to have you here.
My pleasure. Happy to be a part of this wonderful event.
Well, thank you. You have had just an amazing career with Industrial Light and Magic and working with George Lucas. And we are, of course, a Star Wars group. So we're so excited to hear stories of Star Wars, and you're working on A New Hope and to Return of the Jedi. So can you please tell us what is your fondest memory of working on these films that have meant so much to us?
So when I started at Star Wars, none of us had a clue that it was going to become this iconic film and have this huge influence upon generation after generation of people. So we were just young people. It was like we were the Rebel Alliance, because here we gathered with an impossible task, right? It was not enough money, not enough time, 365 shots, easy to remember because 365 days in a year. And we were all under 30. I myself was 24. And it was all a bunch of guys, very few women. The women ran the, Mary Lind and her team ran the editorial, but there were very few women. But since they were younger men, I had worked in the commercial industry prior, and that, older men would hit on you and make you uncomfortable. This group was not like that. This group they were pilots themselves. They were mechanical. They were so smart and so welcoming. And, I came in as an organizer, because what happened was George was in England shooting the movie, and he expected to get all these elements and shots sent over to do front projection. Well, that didn't happen. In a way, that was a blessing, because over half the shots were like in cockpit that needed star backgrounds. And it was supposed to save money and time by having star backgrounds playing in the front projection system. But let's face it, you could use any cockpit. If you add stars to it, have it whipping around or going fast or going slow. So in a way, it was a blessing, but it didn't feel like a blessing to George Lucas. And I'm sure your followers know that he had kind of a breakdown, a nervous breakdown or health issues when he returned from England and found almost nothing was done. But that's when I came in as part of the new production team to try to get organized. So you would think that there would be a little resentment, that people would feel nervous about a new production manager, which was George Mather, and I was hired to assist him. Not at all. Everybody just was grateful to have the organization, grateful to lay it all out, have a plan, because these were all just really bright young people and trying to do the impossible. So the fact that we came in and helped schedule, George Lucas loves a schedule. He loves to see progress.
Mm-hmm.
He loves to see how many shots do we need this week, how many elements, what's in optical. So I helped do that. And I'm Grant McCune, who ran the model shop, used the term officious to describe me one time. And I had to go home and look that up. I was proud of it. I thought it was a compliment. I am very efficient. I really like to get things done. And this was such a warm and welcoming group. And they had so much fun doing their jobs. And then the miracle started. We started delivering everything. We started doing shots. And maybe they weren't perfect, but at that point, we were just getting them in the can and moving on. And I think that we were really close friends. I'm still close friends with many of those folks. I'm certainly Facebook friends with many of them. And, every day we lose more people. I'm sure you know about Ira's passing. He was such a great model maker, and he and Mike Fulmer, it's getting to that point, but I'm holding on, and I'm actually organizing a Empire Strikes Back reunion party. We were going to do it before COVID, and then COVID struck, we had to cancel. And now we're thinking maybe it's safe enough that we could get together. And as a bunch of ancient people who worked on Empire, Star Wars, Jedi, I think everyone's been vaccinated. So I am planning a party for September, October. I would love to have 501 show
Oh,
up, a group of
that's
them. It makes for great photo ops. Everybody should do it for all their big events, as particularly a Star Wars themed event or a space sci-fi themed event. So I'm just very grateful that you guys picked up the baton and ran with it and have created such joy for so many new generations of followers.
Oh, and such a wonderful baton you've given us to be able to run with. I mean, that is just, it's amazing to talk with people who were involved, and we appreciate the end result, but there's such another level of appreciation with seeing how it got to that point. And you really seem to have come in like in midstream and just had to start swimming with it, which is amazing. So you say that you were kind of more involved in commercials and working on that to come in and see all of these different sci-fi components of the film. And something you said that's very interesting to me, and I'd like to know your thoughts. Do you think that part of that willingness to just develop a new technology and a new way of filmmaking was really just a testament to being young and open to ideas, and you were really inventing the wheel as you were rolling it, essentially?
Every script, the director wants to accomplish something that has never been seen before, in my opinion, in visual effects. And look how far we've come. I mean, you look at the simplicity of the Star Wars film, and then even just the way George took it to the next level on Empire, adding so many more shots, and then on Jedi, so many more shots, and then computer graphics entered the picture. And then everything changed. I'm part of the old guard. I'm part of the practical effects unit. And we did everything, even though a computer was involved only to run the motion control camera. Everything was analog. And I just did a show last year at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences where we compared Star Wars with Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
There were 75 credits on Star Wars for visual effects and 365 shots. On Rogue One, there were over 1,000 people credited.
Oh, goodness.
Their budget was 100 times more than our budget. And what they could accomplish was so much more complex. I mean, when we compared the optical compositing system with the digital compositing system in those films, it was just phenomenal. Like, for example, a 4-element simple shot, X-wing chasing Y-wing, shooting laser, that would go through the that would go through the optical printer about 20 times, because you have the holdout mats and you have the animation and you have everything being rephotographed onto a new piece of film. In digital compositing, it's not that it's easy, but you can just do it so much more quickly. We would take, 4 days to see that shot. And now you can get it done in 4 hours and a much more complex shot. So the tools have changed so dramatically. But when I look back at what we were able to accomplish with those old tools and with all those amazing talents, I'm really proud of that work. And I think everybody is. I know John Dykstra in that same Academy program stood up and said of all his work, and look at his credits, I mean, all the Spider-Man, et cetera. He said of all his jobs, this was perhaps the most fun he's ever had. And I think we all felt the same way.
And wonderful that you were all just formed such a family working together on that. Now, you said that the gentlemen who were involved were so welcoming, and that even being a slightly different experience than what you had in previous workplaces. So, and we all know that women in sci-fi, as a woman myself and I have 2 daughters, I'm so excited for the things that are available now and the way that women can become involved in that industry. And just your personal story is a wonderful women's empowerment. And could you share a little bit of that experience, that you seem to really come into a very welcoming and open to the idea environment, but how did it go from there?
Well, let's talk about children,
Yes.
because women have babies and none of us had kids then. So it was easy to dedicate our entire lives to the work. Once I started having children. I was at ILM now. I was still head of production on Jedi. Um, and after Jedi, I decided, okay, I'm gonna have babies. So George Lucas's company, Industrial Light and Magic, again, so responsive to the fact, I mean, part of it was because I was good and I was needed. But they let me shift my job to marketing so that, because in production, it would be really hard to be head of production at a visual effects studio and try to pick up your kids from daycare at 6 p.m. Well, when I was pregnant, George Lucas said, it was right after Jedi, and we were doing the Ewok movie, the first TV Ewok movie, and I was associate producer. And George said, look, I don't want to see you around here for 5 years after you have this kid. I said, well, that would be nice, but I'm not exactly, wealthy, so that's not really an option. Well, he gave me one piece of 1 point on Jedi, which allowed me to stay home a whole year with my first child.
Oh,
And by the time I was pregnant with my third child, I was running marketing. It was the first marketing department we'd ever had, because prior to that, we had just done George's movies or George's friends movies. So now we needed to reach out and really, we had our first demo reel. We did a lot. But here I am pregnant with my third child, and I show up at a company meeting with a baby in each arm and pregnant. And I say to the crowd, I want to have your babies, because I wanted to start a daycare center. And this was totally with Lucasfilm support. And at the time, Doug Norby was the president. And he had come from Fairchild in the Valley, Silicon Valley. So he knew the value of daycare. He knew that a parent would never leave their job if their child was happy in the daycare, just for 10% more money or something. So he backed me, even though not a single person signed up their children that day. So my 3 kids started that daycare, started working. We set it up with Larry Tan's wife, Genevieve, and her team were in day school. And they set up a daycare center offsite, but 5 minutes away. And that daycare center only opened with my 2 kids, and then I delivered a third. But within a month, it was booked, and it's been booked ever since. And how my kids are now 35, 36 years old. So it's been booked ever since. And truly, I feel like that's my greatest legacy with the company, because I pushed it through, and Doug Norby backed me, and George Lucas backed me. So that, and it's so true. People will stay at their job, and the longevity, it's one of the rare companies where people have stayed year after year after year. Even some of my friends are still working there, that I started with, that worked with me on Jedi. So that was really the greatest thing that I could have contributed as a woman, as a mother, because balancing your life is so critical. And visual effects has not been kind to balance. And unfortunately, I think it's great that the whole world is rising, the boat is rising, and the visual effects have become a part of every single film. And there's so many people working in the industry and so many billions spent. But because of the tax incentives offered by so many other countries other than California, even in the United States, there are states that do offer incentives. California offers very little incentive. And we were the home for visual effects. And now it's not. It's Canada, England, everywhere else, where they get 40% discount. How do you compete with that?
Right.
So dads tend to go overseas to work, and the mom stays home with the kids. Well, that's not a way forward. So we really have to look at this and help people share jobs. I'm a big fan of job sharing for women. And let's just face it, women are as smart as men, and women can do the job. And there's possibly even less ego involved. And so I'll do anything I can to help women get a foot in the door here.
That's a wonderful legacy, and so wonderful that the corporate mentality of Industrial Light and Magic has been to allow for that life and work balance. So that's wonderful. And you took that and just ran with it. So your experience then with working on multiple films, how have you seen certainly the visual effects have changed and just become more and more amazing with every film. But looking at your marketing that you did with the films, how do you find that has changed? I recall seeing a early Comic-Con that actually had a stand-up kind of poster of Darth Vader, and they were encouraging people to come and see this new movie, this new space movie, and it's Star Wars. So, and now to think that from that very small beginning, just the buzz that happens before, I mean, we already know many years in advance what movies are coming, and the excitement is no less diminished. So what's been your experience having seen that entire arc?
You know, I think George Lucas put it best when I just recently saw a speech that he gave to some group, and it was reposted on LinkedIn. And I really think Star Wars stands separate from most movies. Like, you look at the Marvel comic book movies, and those are the ones that are the big blockbusters, right? But Star Wars he made because he wanted to show the Force. He wanted young people who maybe weren't religious to see that there was something to believe in. And so he made it very clear there's the Force, which is lightness and generosity and goodness and sharing. And there's the dark side, which is selfish, self-motivated, greedy, and controlling. And I thought that because he put that movie out there, that's why it's lasted, because it's about something so critical to people's spirit and soul. And so young people get it. I don't know if you've seen the movie Soul by Pixar.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I love that movie. And in a way, it does the same thing. It talks about why are you put on earth? What is the purpose? And I think George's message, and then Pixar, which of course is a spinoff from George Lucas's efforts, those are the kind of movies that are going to last and that people are going to watch over and over again, because it touches something deep in the soul. It's not just candy and fun and eye candy. It's really about something. So I really don't put his movies in the same category. I don't put the Star Wars saga in the same category as the Marvel and the other big blockbusters. Jurassic Park was great. It was very exciting, but it didn't change people's lives. Whereas Star Wars really did change people's lives. I mean, look at 501, changed their lives.
Absolutely.
I remember once, Camellia, what's her name? She's in the 501. She's one of the leaders in the Bay Area. And she and her husband are both 501ers. And she came to me at ILM and said, I want to get married here. And this was when it was Kerner. It was the spinoff from ILM. And I thought, oh, cool. We can do a big marketing thing about this. And we can have the local news, and this will be great for us. So an hour before she's married, she calls me to her, she's getting ready. And she said, I can't have the press here. This is my day. This is my wedding. And I thought, oh no. But I honored her request, and we didn't have any press there. And she had a wonderful, beautiful wedding on the main stage. And I was disappointed because, when you talk about marketing, that would have been, hit it out of the ballpark kind of, we would have been on the local news, but it was her day, and it was her wedding, and she got to make that choice. So marketing doesn't always work out the way we want it to.
Very good of you to honor that, and what a wonderful day that must have been. I think Star Wars has touched so many areas of our life. You think about it, and just like that, having a wedding. I see so many Star Wars themed baby nurseries. It's come into all areas of pop culture. And one thing I think is just wonderful. You really hit it by saying that it's life-changing. It really affects so many parts of people's lives. And I think that multi-generational a love that I see at events that the 501st goes to. I see people my age with their parents, and they have children, and not to give away my age, but I could start having grandchildren anytime here soon. Just think it's so wonderful that this is something that a family can share together. And it does really hit those important things about life, that doing good and doing good against sometimes insurmountable difficulty, against the empire. It's going against something so much bigger than just your individual self, but doing it because it's right, and it's the right fight to take. So how is that? How have you felt that in your experience?
So empowering, we at ILM, I think the force is with us because everyone seems like a good person. It didn't ever feel like Hollywood backstabbing or stepping on someone to get something for yourself. So I think it starts at the top, and George created an environment that kind of a person would be run out. It was a lot of people caring about each other and a lot of people wanting to do the best work possible. I mean, in some ways, I remember when Warren Franklin was the general manager and he went off to Stanford Business School for a stint. It was an executive program. And he shared with his class that he was having a real problem because everybody cared too much. Everybody cared too much about the work, and they were staying late overtime, unauthorized, to do a shot again that had already been accepted. And all these people looked at him like, that's a problem, that your people care too much? That our problem is the opposite. Because I think in corporate America, it's really hard to have that level of commitment, caring, and responsibility. But George Lucas, he sent a very strong message one day at Dailies, when this guy had stayed up all night redoing a shot that had already been accepted. And George said, you're right. That is a better shot. And you did make a mistake in the bottom left-hand corner, previous take, but I'm going to use the previous take because I told you that was a final and you wasted time redoing it. And if anyone's looking at that lower left-hand corner, then we have lost them. So, wow. That was a strong message. I don't actually know if he did cut in that redo, but he said he didn't, and I believe him. So I think that's where we stood apart, is that we cared so much, and the people it was like we were friends. We weren't just workmates, and maybe that is because of the subject matter of the films. But we carried that into all films. Like, not every film, has the heart and soul that Star Wars has. And yet we, the people who worked on those films, did have the heart and soul, and we carried it in. And there were just, there was great parties and great caring and helping each other. I mean, this community comes out for each other. When I organized there was a guy that one of our soldiers, one of our model makers, fell. He had a stroke, and he was in need of money to get therapy because his insurance wasn't providing enough. So we did a huge event, and in the Bay Area, so many people at ILM, and this was from Kerner. He is a fallen soldier from Kerner, the spinoff. And we raised almost $100,000 for him because every artist at ILM created a work of art and we auctioned it all off. And then we had this huge party, and over 250 people came to the party, and everybody just wanted to talk to each other and hug. Nobody wanted to bid on anything, which drove me crazy, but we still raised a bunch of money for him. And then when Mike Fulmer died, we had a gathering. We couldn't for Ira Keeler because of COVID, but we had a gathering, and it's like the community shows up even years later. We still care about each other, and I really do credit ILM and George Lucas and the message in those films that attracted us to work on them and that have kept us afloat and kept us on the path of righteousness. You sound like a religious person, but
you're proud to be a part of it. It made you feel so proud to be a part of building that. So you're absolutely
correct.
To have that wonderful pride of and a part of ownership and helping see that vision.
And I know that this next party is going to be equally kick-ass because people are going to want to come. And I'm afraid I have a guest list of like 300,
Oh,
and that does not
exciting.
include spouses or significant others. So, but main stage, if you spill out into the parking lot, I mean, into the, courtyard, I think we can handle about 500 people. So that's going to be wonderful. And it's just going to be so great to hug everybody again
Oh,
after all this
yes.
time where we've been isolated and unable to do so. And I know the community will show up again.
Oh, yes.
I always get yes when I was asking for food donations or asking for artists to give work for our buddy, our fallen comrade. I got nothing but yes. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's very nice to think that this Star Wars series of movies, the saga that we love so much, has within it such wonderful people, that it comes from a true place of good people who wanted to create something. And I just, at the time you mentioned doing Star Wars and not knowing what it would eventually become. Did you have an idea by the time Empire came out and then Return of the Jedi? Did you start to see, oh wow, this is really becoming something amazing?
Even sooner. It was when Star Wars opening day. I was with George at the dubbing stage or something. We were doing like foreign releases and making sure, it wasn't dubbing, but making sure that the foreign releases were in order. And he just needed, I said, let me go out and get some dinner or something. And he said, no, I need a break. So I'll go for a walk and pick up dinner. So he walked down Hollywood Boulevard and he saw the Grauman Chinese Theater with lines around the block with people dressed up in Star Wars costumes, like their own version.
Yes.
And it was opening day. And by the time he came back, just like stunned white, he forgot to pick up dinner. And he started getting calls from Alan Ladd Jr. and Steven Spielberg and stuff saying, oh my God, you have a huge hit. So it was very, very early. And even before that day, I flew up to San Francisco, where my family's from, to see a sneak preview. It was the very first screening of Star Wars, and there were still some scenes missing. And I invited my family, and my parents came, and my siblings came. And we're sitting in a theater filled with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And the very opening shot, the famous Star Destroyer slowly coming toward camera, everyone started cheering. And I looked over at George and he looked so surprised. And then at the end of the movie, he was just mobbed. And we went to the Sheraton Palace for lunch. And my parents, I've never seen them so excited about a movie. And they were talking about how it reminded them of serials in their day when they were kids and would go to the movies and see a serial before the main feature. And how interesting, because Mandalorian is so much like that, right?
Yes.
It's a little serial and it's keeping it alive. And that
Mhm.
makes Yoda, how cute is he? I mean, it's not Yoda, I know, but it
That's
sure
important.
looks like him.
Yes.
So I kind of credit my nephew with creating Baby Yoda, because it was opening day at Presidio when they had moved to the Presidio in San Francisco. And it was a big party and I got invited and I brought my nephew, who was like 8. And I got a picture of him with George. And then I said, George, my nephew has a question for you. And he looked at George Lucas and he said, who trained Yoda? Like, what's the backstory on Yoda? And George was like stumped. And on the way out, I saw Howard Rothman in licensing, and I told him the story. And he thought, his little eyes were spinning, or his brain was spinning, and I could see that the seed was planted.
Yes,
so when I
the
saw
Baby
it,
Yoda scene. Oh, that's a
yeah.
wonderful story. How now, I mean, that incredible history and incredible experience, now seeing some of the new films that are coming and how wonderful Mandalorian has been, how do you watch those yourself and enjoy those yourself?
So much more than if I was working on it, because when you're working on a film, every heartbreaking story behind every single scene, and all you see are the flaws, and all you see are what could have been. And so now I can just turn on Mandalorian and completely enjoy it. I'm so interested in this virtual production
Mhm.
and how that is revolutionizing visual effects, and how now visual effects are incorporated from the very beginning. Like as soon as you have a script, you have to be designing those things, because if you're going to shoot the live action in virtual production, you need to project the actual shots, finished shots. So now we don't wait till production wraps to start the work. Production has to, you know, visual effects have to start during pre-production.
Oh,
So I love the new technology. I love the new direction. And frankly, I love that it's an expanding field and that so many people can find work in it, and so many people all over the world. I just want California to incentivize people to keep the work in California as well. There's enough work now. We are actually in a time where we need more people. We
oh,
need more workers. So I'm working with the Visual Effects Society
mhm.
in a mentoring program, and we're going out to schools and trying to plant the seed in these young minds that there's jobs in this industry.
Mhm.
It's not just for artists. It's not just for technical computer science geeks. It's for anyone who wants to work in this field. There are jobs for, if you're a good organizer, there's jobs. If you're a good artist, there's jobs. If you're a coder, there's so many jobs building things, making things on the computer. Everything
Mhm.
is computerized now, although Mandalorian does throw in some traditional effects work, and that might still be viable. But by and large, we are talking about creating the images using computers. So, but it's a field. So this mentorship program has really taken off. We're going to schools, we're planting those seeds, and we've started an active mentorship program so that we're connecting experienced people from the Visual Effects Society with people that want someone to look at their reel or their portfolio. I'm a big fan of Rise Up Animation, Access Visual Effects, Women in Animation. They all have active mentorship programs. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we're sending people to those organizations.
That's wonderful. And such, that is that mentorship that will continue. I personally have always been, I know the technology is changing, but the practical effects, and I think that we couldn't be where we are right now without that foundation, that strong foundation that still has a place. There's still things that are always going to have a different feel. And that may be a little bit of nostalgia for what we watched when we were younger and grew up with. But I love where the technology is going, and I love the things that are possible now. And so,
Well, when you look at the spin-off, okay,
mhm,
so George Lucas really was very early to commit to computer graphics, right? He brought in Pixar, he brought in the people that became Pixar. And the very first time we used them was on Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. And they did the Genesis effect. And that was so interesting because it was the first time we'd worked together, and I hadn't budgeted anything. We hadn't planned on doing that. So I was only able to give them like $10,000 in the budget. It cost $250,000. So
oh my.
yeah, because it was breaking new ground.
Yes.
Um, but in the end, George decided to go completely digital. And when he moved everybody to the Presidio, the people left behind were the camera people and the model makers and the pyro guys. And so they formed Kerner Optical, which of course had been our original name. And they invited me back to be the executive producer and do the marketing and such. So here I am back with the best. I've always, been felt so lucky to have worked with the best, smartest people. And at first we were getting tons of work, mostly from ILM, like on Pirates of the Caribbean, giant ships, that got to be blown up. And
Oh.
and that was so much fun. I would always do this before a shoot, because we had one take to do the pyro.
Yes.
And the client would look at me like, oh my God, is that really necessary? I'm like, it can't hurt.
I can't hurt.
So really, I can only remember one time where one take didn't work, and that was on a Zeppelin blow up on Joe Johnston's movie. And it's because the pyro didn't go off in sequence. So we had to rebuild and redo. But
Oh,
other than
goodness.
that, we have been very successful. But anyway, so the spinoff happened and all this work. So the first year, tons of, like $20 million of work. Second year, 16. Third year, 8.
Hmm.
Fourth year, 4. And that's when I said, guys, it's over. And I moved on to the golf industry because I love golf. So it was really sad, but everybody still had work, and I remember when I was executive producer of a show called Bump in the Night, we had 22 stages going, shooting like, we were doing a show every week for ABC Saturday morning, and it was stop motion.
I
And
remember it.
you do?
Yes, I'm Mr. Bumpy, Bump in the Night. I
Bump in the Night.
claymation. It
So
had a humor that was not always for kids there, and watching it now, and I've been able to catch it on some other platforms. And I remember how funny it was watching it the first time, and then watching again, it's like, oh my goodness, this had so much nuance to it and so many other layers to it. So
yes, as the Pixar movie, I was going to say, at the end of Bump in the Night, I think 2 seasons, plug was pulled by ABC. I set up a job fair and invited ILM, Tippett's, Electronic Arts, all the big, huge studios locally. And they all showed up, Pixar too. Everybody got hired.
oh,
So they're very much retrainable. If you're an animator, you can learn computer graphics animation. So any kind of animation is going to get you started. And then the fact that all these people got hired, I felt so good about that. And even at Kerner, the spinoff, gosh, we worked for another 5 years. And then a spinoff from that is this animatronic group of model makers that creates live animatronics for the military, so that people can learn how to do tourniquets and such on an actual moving body
my
with blood
goodness.
and everything.
What an
Even cut
interesting
that out.
application. Oh, that's such an interesting application, though, that you would not think that talent could translate to something like that.
I know. So it's a talent that has many, many facets, but computer graphics has eaten up our industry. And I miss the good old days of actually blowing shit up, because that was super exciting.
So were there any, you mentioned the blowing up the ships and parts of the Caribbean, and were there any explosions that you remember markedly from any of the Star Wars films that maybe you thought that is never going to work, and then it came off and it was this amazing effect?
Yes, we shot for Star Wars, for the Death Star blowing up. Those were always big shoots, big pyro. And I think we ended up going to Cow Palace in San Francisco. And I had my parents show up because they love this stuff. And they're sitting in the seats and watching Bruce Hill and his, I don't remember, 1,000 frame per second, so you could really slow down the explosion. And that was so beautiful. And it was so huge and gorgeous. And the camera was on the ground looking up, this giant sparkly explosion. So that was one memory that I had that I dreamt of that for weeks. I can't think of any that didn't work. As I say, just that one Zeppelin shot that didn't work. And pyro is so tricky. You have to be so conscious and so aware. But we've always had excellent pyro people, Thane Morris, followed by Mr. Heron, Jeff Heron. They're some of my favorite people because they are just 100% focused, as was everybody. I mean, imagine how focused you have to be on an optical printer to not make a mistake in a 10-hour shot.
Oh,
I know.
That's amazing. I think when you're talking about the Death Star blowing up, I'm thinking of how the appreciation for the practical effect of the Death Star blowing up, and then subsequent versions of it that had more enhancements. But there's something to that explosion, and something to the speeding away shot while the sail barge is burning, and just those amazing multi-layer shots that there's so much going on. And I think some of the, I guess, complaints, if there's a complaint about some more digital things, is sometimes it's happening so fast that you're not processing all these events happening, but you were capturing it in real time and still building on this amazing shot. And it's just, that's just amazing talent in your team, and you, and just the level of ability in those people. That's, it's created shots that I can see it right now, just thinking of that. It's just such an indelible facet of that film.
We would break into applause in the screening room at shots like that. You just couldn't help it.
I believe
And
that.
no wonder people started clapping for the Star Destroyer coming so close to the camera, you know, coming in
Yes.
over the camera. It just, iconic moments like that George Lucas created. And then to think that he was disappointed in the film, it's just, he must have very high expectations for himself.
Yes.
But I'm happy for him. He's such a good dad. He was always so attentive to his kids, and then created that space for us to be attentive to our kids. I remember he recommended I read a book, something about self-esteem in children, when I was pregnant. I thought that was so generous of him to care.
It seems like you are an amazing mentor who was under an amazing mentor in
Yeah,
life and in the business and in so many ways that
I'm sure that he planted those seeds in me
Yes.
that made me want to give back. And you know, I hope to do more. I've got a
and
call in 10 minutes about the
ah,
mentorship program.
well, thank you so much for your time, and you have planted seeds, and you have gone on to do, I'm sure you have many more things you will do, and you have done so much. So I will close our time, but just say, just ask you, what does Star Wars mean to you? What is your final thought on Star Wars, which is still going on? It's not over.
So true. I would say my biggest takeaway was that I have never had so much fun in my life. I mean, people talk about their work being really important. Well, it was so important to me, and working with the best people in the business, it spoiled me forever. When I moved into the golf industry, I'm like, this is it. This is the talent level that we have here, and customer service level. We were so dedicated to the film, to the business, to each other. And I really miss that. I miss those people so much daily. And so I think that's why I'm active in the Visual Effects Society. I do represent the old guard, but I have nothing but great memories.
That's wonderful. So wonderful. Well, thank you so
And thank you to 501 for all you do, and keep up the good work. And I'll see you at the Empire Party, okay?
Absolutely. It sounds like it's been a wonderful time, and thank you so much. Be well.
All right, you too.
Force be with you.
You too, dear. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.